Hey, buddy. Hello, everybody. So what I'm going to try to do in a fairly short period of time is tell you about not just what NFTs really are. I know we think of them as media files and whatnot. What they really are, but where they came from. And that's very useful information to have, because if you know what the origin of something is, you can kind of predict where it's going to go. And we'll finish up with some predictions about NFTs and what things are inevitable, that if you're an investor or you're an entrepreneur building something, a marketplace or something else for NFTs, what you can probably take for granted. So obviously, NFTs, this is easy to understand for most of us. When we think about them as media files. What I'd like you to do today, though, is think about NFTs as something much more abstract, much different and bigger than simply a way to connect a media file, a video clip or a music clip or an image to a blockchain. By the way, some of you may know this, but for those of you who don't, there's really no way to connect an image onto a blockchain, right? The images or the video files themselves are actually stored somewhere else. We were the first ones at my company, Wax, to store them in a distributed, decentralized manner so that if we ever went away, your NFT wouldn't. Whenever you buy an NFT, just make sure that that image is not being stored on some personal developer's Amazon account, because that happens a lot. So NFTs are a lot more than meets the eye. I like to think about things, as I mentioned, in almost the abstract way, because I spent 25 years as a venture capitalist. So I like to bubble it up and say, what is this thing really? I'd encapsulate NFTs in this respect. What makes them so remarkable is that they allow you to send something of value to somebody else, where that recipient, the person who gets it, knows with certainty at no cost that that thing is authentic. And if you think about that as long and hard as I have, I think you'll come away with one conclusion, which is there is no other thing on earth that has those characteristics, where I can send something anywhere around the world near instantly, and you know it is authentic. And as a result of that, we can go far beyond things like images and video clips and music clips. Eventually, all parts of industry are going to be incorporating NFTs because of this marvelous trait that it has. Think of NFTs from now on as computers, because that's what they are. An NFT is a Turing-complete computer. It's a computer that you can send to anybody, where the code can never be edited. That's what makes it fantastic. Any other piece of software, you don't know if somebody's inserted spyware into it or has changed it so it functions differently than what you thought it was going to do. But here you're sending computers to people that have never had any change from their original intent. So that's the way I like to think about them. And then we can think about all the applications. The first one, of course, being imagery. Back in 2017, I was at this conference in London, where I first presented the idea of putting media files on a blockchain. It hadn't been done yet. And at that time, almost everybody in the audience thought, why would you ever want to do that? And why wouldn't you just use Bitcoin or something like that to store a file? And it took a while. But of course, in January 2021, everything changed. For reasons that I'll leave the historians to figure out, NFTs blew up in January 2021 and have continued to grow massively. NFTs will be the on-ramp for mass market adoption of blockchain. So let's get to where they came from. NFTs, the early versions of them, were really video game virtual items, part of massively multiplayer online games, which is my background. In the 1990s, companies started to allow you to have a virtual object in a video game that you could transfer to somebody else. There were a lot of restrictions, which I'll talk about in a second, but you could do that. And my friends and I started thinking about making a business out of allowing people to transfer them. Of course, transferring those items had a lot of risks. How do you pay for them? Who sends it first? Those were all things we had to battle that, frankly, NFTs with smart contracts as the middleman have solved. For those of you who are first-person shooter video game people, you'll recognize that as a Counter-Strike Global Offensive Dragon Lore rifle. You get it in olive drab as its native form, and then you can dress it up. By the way, that skin, and a skin is a video game virtual item that is strictly cosmetic. It has no in-game utility, but it's still very attractive because you can stand out. When someone sees that in their rifle, in their game, they know that's a $40,000 skin. Now, I remember people gasping in 2017 when I said that, because that cost around 10 Bitcoin at the time. Obviously, Bitcoin's gone up. But it's not surprising, because the reason people have skins in video games is the same reason people have tattoos. It's because they want to stand out. They want to appear different. And for a lot of people in the video game world, their in-game persona is actually more important to them than what people think about them in the real world. They want to stand out. They want to appear to be distinctive, a very important element of media NFTs today. By the way, for those of you who have done generative art, that's where you get an algorithm, and the algorithm actually makes the piece of art. A lot of people think, oh, NFTs created that. Actually, not true. It might even go before this time, 2003, but there was a video game called Quake that you could modify, and you could modify it to create interesting objects, colorful objects. Of course, when you did that, no one knew the provenance of it, and as a result of not knowing the provenance of it, it couldn't really retain the value like you see today with guys like Beeple getting $69 million for an NFT. Even marketplaces, my partner's marketplace, this is circa 2005, allowed you to buy and sell virtual items, trading them back and forth, using a whole range of different currencies, and people were playing games in order to mine or to acquire these virtual items and then sell them. For those of you in the play-to-earn video game world, the origins of that are almost 20 years old. And now, today, the amount of money made in video games globally every year is $200 billion. Now, that's very high margin money, right? That's not like selling $200 billion worth of automobiles. This is near all profit. So it is a very big industry. That's the primary sales, the sales that come from the companies selling these items to you. The secondary markets are huge, around $50 billion. By the way, I'll talk about in a second what's different in the secondary and primary markets, but $50 billion is a lot, but it's a fraction of the primary market. So how are NFTs different from what I just showed you? Because that's the origin of them. The first, I mentioned this a second ago, is that the primary market in traditional video games is much bigger than the secondary market. For every dollar in primary sales, you generate around 25 cents in secondary. Whole bunch of reasons for that, often because they're restricted. And that restriction is, for me, the biggest difference between NFTs and what came before them, video game virtual items. Video game virtual items are ruled by overlords. When I started doing internet investing and building companies in the 90s, I had no idea how powerful these intermediaries would become. And today, whether it's Apple or Google or Steam, Meta now, Tencent, they control a huge portion of the video game market. And they're for-profit companies, centralized, and they have restrictions. They have lots of restrictions on anything you do, particularly when it comes to their video game virtual items. If you've ever looked at the terms of service for those items, you'll see about 10 pages long. What it says very distinctly is you are using these for entertainment. You do not own them. So ownership is a huge difference between NFTs and video game virtual items. Because if you own them, then you need to ask no one's permission. And I certainly hope we do not lose permissionless blockchains, meaning you can do whatever your imagination says you can do, because we don't have permission today. The overlords dictate what we're allowed to do. The other giant difference between a video game virtual item and a NFT, of course, is that, as I've mentioned, they're computers. Every NFT is a Turing-complete computer. They can be programmed to do whatever you want. We've seen nothing yet. The age of intelligent NFTs is coming. And today, even, as I've mentioned, these things are Turing-complete computers, storing metadata, history. It's what makes them capable of someone knowing with certainty that that thing is authentic. And of course, since it can be programmed, essentially, you can do whatever you can with software. And if you take these things, if you take smart NFTs, intelligent computer NFTs, and you pair that with a permissionless blockchain or a permissionless metaverse, you get what we call Web 3. This is how, there's 100 definitions for what Web 3 is, but this is how I think about it. Web 3 is us going back to the roots of the internet, where you could do what you wanted to do before the platform companies took over and started capturing all the value. Web 3 means open economies. You build whatever you can do. And if you're on a so-called metaverse at some time in the future and you notice somebody is saying what you can or cannot do, then it's not Web 3. And this is what we really need to be pushing for. This is, by the way, what is subversive. This is what should scare these platform companies. I certainly hope the era of those is starting to wane, because there's so many restrictions on what we're allowed to do. So if we get to this glorious future in a few years, where we have open economies, we can build what we want to do, I think the future is very bright for a lot more people, rather than maybe 10 companies globally that control what we write, what we search for, how we pay for it, what we're allowed to do on the web. But where are we right now? So I'd say we're at the tail end of NFT era 1.0. And I assume most of you in this audience have probably participated in that. So NFT era 1.0 had this particular distinction to it. Almost all the NFTs are built on a single blockchain. For those of you who have been in this space as long as I have, you know that the idea about making things multi-blockchain is really exciting and whatnot, but it's very, very hard to do. Take it from me, I've built several blockchains. It's tough, but today, NFTs are mostly resident on one chain. Yes, you can move them. On Wax, we allow you to move an Ethereum NFT to Wax, but you incur that fee, that $20, $30, $50 gas fee on Ethereum. The other piece, of course, is we had a bunch of art, which I'm quite happy happened, because it introduced almost everybody in the world to what an NFT or what you could do with the blockchain, why it was special. That was useful. The collectibles industry, something I'd been doing for a while, has really benefited from this. Here you had baseball cards, the Topps baseball card company, being able to offer people cards where you know with certainty how many were made. As a collector, I can tell you, you never knew that. I mean, you had to kind of trust the issuer, but you really didn't know how many were made. That's a very cool thing about NFTs. Look at the smart contract, you know exactly how many items have been made and how many wallets they're in. Profile pictures. This one, I will admit, caught me by surprise. I did not expect PFP NFTs to be as big as they are. They're not as big in most video games, and that's probably why I didn't fully get it. And then, of course, it is the realm of indie developers, which I'll talk about in a second a little bit more. But indies are always the ones who do things first because, frankly, they have nothing to lose. They're not protecting a franchise. But indies don't have that many resources, so they can only take things so far. So we've ended or are about to end Era 1.0, and we're going into Era 2.0. And the big one that you'll see soon is cross-chain compatibility. At some point in the next 5 years, I think some people might think it's sooner, but there's a lot of technical challenges. At some point, the blockchain you're on will probably be unknown to you. The only reason it'll be irrelevant or will be relevant is because maybe the fee structure or what you can do with the smart contract. So you're going to want to be able to port these things from chain to chain. That will happen. Identity. This is a huge use case for blockchain in general. The notion that all of your personal identifying characteristics can be stored in a blockchain, accessible with your permission only for some short period of time. By the way, if the blockchain had been built at the dawn of the internet, this is how it would have been done. Have you ever thought about how many websites you have sent your personal identifying information to? Your social security number, your address, your work history, obviously things like phone number, email. And do those companies ever tell you whether or not they've had a breach? Up until recently, there was no requirement to do that. Even now, they don't tell you everything that's happened. So putting all of your information in a blockchain and giving someone permission to get it is an amazing thing. And it can't be modified except by you. So great use case for NFTs. This is a cool thing. Membership rights. Lots of people have started thinking about this. AMC Movie Theater has done this for its shareholders. They asked me, can we give an NFT to our shareholders where we can send them airdrops of additional NFTs, movie premiere dates that they can get in early, concession stand freebies, apparel, all of that tokenized and delivered through an NFT. So that's something that will probably, I don't know, maybe every corporation soon will be doing. Yield-generating instruments. A bearer instrument is just a yield-generating or income-earning instrument that is owned by somebody and needs no particular permission to be sent. A bearer instrument simply means whoever bears it owns it and gets the benefits of it. That, by the way, that mining excavator, that's a tool used to mine on a play-to-earn game on the Wax platform. That thing was selling for $70,000 because it allowed you to mine a coin earning about $4,000 or $5,000 a day. So we're talking real money. And as a result of that, you have lending and collateral. So the ability to use your NFT as a source of collateral is an enormous benefit to consumer finance. I think we are going to see a vast amount of consumer-owned technology, consumer-owned assets turned into NFTs and used as collateral. By the way, the difference in interest rate that you will pay for an unsecured loan versus a fully secured loan is gigantic. You might pay 10, 12, 15% for an unsecured loan. You might pay 2 to 3% for a secured loan. So lending is a big future use for NFTs. What's going to happen in the future that I think is going to be inevitable? And as a venture capitalist, I've always used this as a heuristic for thinking about what we're going to be investing in. it's a very good idea to say, yes, the future is unknown, but there are things that seem inevitable. And those are the things that should be the foundation of, let's say, your investment thesis. So I'll be going through a couple of those here. The first is that consumer products will be tokenized. There are about $20 trillion annually in an 80 trillion or so economy of consumer products. Not all of them, but many of them are going to have digital twins. You are going to be given the choice when you go to an e-commerce site. Do you want the NFT first, which can be redeemed later, or do you want the physical object set? There's a whole bunch of reasons, if you start to think about it, why you might want the virtual item first. One is that there's a trend among consumer products purchasers, it's been going on for years, where many of the people who buy those things are not the intended end user. If you think about the toy industry, virtually no one who buys toys is the end user of the toy. Hasbro and Mattel are two companies that I've worked with to tokenize their products this year, and they'll be doing a lot more of that in the future. Returns much easier when it's a virtual object. Another fantastic thing to think about is, in my early career, I was a bank auditor, and we existed to verify the authenticity of documents. There are millions of people around the world whose job is just to verify that a document is real. NFTs do that with no humans and no effort. So that entire industry of document identification is going to change. It's going to be automated. Another industry that's going to see enormous change is industries that collect fees. Now, most consumers begrudgingly pay fees, and often the companies that charge those fees have monopoly positions, particularly where they're in government-regulated industries like finance. But thinking about NFTs natively collect fees. The smart contract grabs it and pays out royalties. It does whatever you've programmed it to do. I was the CFO of Disney's licensing division a long, long time ago, and the largest group of people we had on staff were auditors who went around and audited licensing companies trying to figure out if they paid what they were supposed to pay. With NFTs, you not only know that every royalty was accurate, you know it instantly by inspecting the blockchain. So that's another industry that's going to be turned upside down by NFTs. This one here, so there's a lot of thinking around how blockchain gaming is going to evolve. It's been an industry I've been in since the 90s, so I have pretty strong opinions about it. I'll tell you this, something that I'm very confident we can all take for granted. Blockchain video gaming will not be won by the incumbent AAA game companies. It will be new entrants. And the reason I can feel very confident about that is because that's the way it's always been. Since gaming became electronic with the arcade games of the 1970s, every new gaming platform had a new set of companies that came about. In console, it was Nintendo, PC, Valve, and many others. Valve, of course, is the creator of the Steam game distribution and CSGO. The browser-based flash games, companies like King, mobile, of course, Supercell, Axie being one of the games today for blockchain. You can pretty much guarantee that anytime there's a new platform, a new set of companies are going to emerge. So don't be thinking about looking at older companies and thinking they're the ones who are going to somehow trump what's being done, because they're going to be late. Most big video game companies still aren't sure that they should do it. Another thing, some might say this is wishful thinking, but I don't think it is. NFTs will not exist on these platforms. Google Play, the Apple App Store, Meta, Microsoft, they won't exist because they won't be real NFTs. Now, for those of you who say, well, wait a minute, didn't Ubisoft, this giant video game company, just announce NFTs? They announced something, but it's not an NFT. I looked because I was curious. Wow, they're doing NFTs. Anytime you see a thing in the terms of service called requirements or permissions, you know it's probably not an NFT. I circled a few things there, noting who's eligible to own these. By the way, you got to play the game for 100 hours to own it. So, and you can't transfer it without first giving them all your personal identifying information. So I was pleased to see that a number of Twitter people pointed this out. The guy there says, I thought the point of doing this was so users could actually own them. I love that answer. That's a common misconception. Exactly what you would expect for big video game companies. This is another version of that. AAA gaming business models are not compatible with DeFi. The DeFi mentioned, by the way, is sort of funny to me because play-to-earn gaming is actually a variant of decentralized finance. So the reality is the businesses that have business models that need to be protected are never going to allow NFTs. Don't be fooled if they co-opt the word. It's not actually an NFT. A few other things here quickly. China has closed the door to blockchain video gaming. The largest video game market in the world has said no more. So that's a negative from one perspective. You know, 1.5 billion people who we can't sell to. On the other hand, they're not going to compete with everybody else. Patents, the patent wars are coming. Many, many companies are starting to file patents in the blockchain space, and we will have to contend with those. In terms of what kind of impact NFTs have had so far, it's been huge. If you look at the top 10 blockchains by transaction volume, all of them have thriving ecosystems. And if you look at the dApps, all the major dApps on blockchains exist because of NFTs. So for those who say, are NFTs a fad, I would say there is so much more to come. An NFT collection may become a fad, but a computer that powers them will not. I'll finish it here. This is how you might want to think about the impact of NFTs in the world. NFTs are at the center of 3 enormous human behaviors: shopping, trading, and playing, which we've been doing for 10,000 years. NFTs assist in all of those, and it is trillions of dollars of value that they're at the focal point of. And that's why it's an exciting place to be. And that concludes my remarks.